All right, everyone, here we are at Around the Coin. We are back again with myself, Mike Townsend. We have Brian Romley and Faisal Khan on the show today, and this is part two of our recap of the past 50 episodes and the year of 2014 as we go into the grand spanking new year of 2015. How are Brian and Faisal doing? Both connected here?
Wonderful.
Good morning. How are you? Doing good.
Great, great. Excited. The second half of the year, I feel like we really got into a rhythm in 2014. And as we recap these episodes, it brings back a little bit of, memories, what we were doing at the time. This one, episode 26, as we're about to jump into, was really special because I remember just Brian's genuine excitement about his trip to the White House and working with the cabinet crew there. And I look forward to kind of hearing where the state is now and a little bit of recap of your experience, Brian. And then we'll just continue to jump episode by episode and kind of update the listeners and ourselves as to what the state of affairs are for that topic.
Well, yes. Incredible looking back. It seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't really that far. There was a whole series of things that took place that led me to uh, be honored to interact with President Obama's economic advisors, and one in particular was which he focused on small business. And the thing that we really focused on, and the thing that is bearing fruit today, was getting small and medium-sized contractors paid on time. These are contractors not just to the government, to major corporations who have had open invoices. It's called net terms in the industry, from having to use third-party loan sources to try to fund their operations, even though they're owed the money. Anyway, the long story to this is short story to long story is President Obama signed an executive order of which Apple, IBM, and now over 100 companies have pledged not only to pay on time, but to pay small and medium-sized vendors within 15 days. The government is also taking this approach, and it's kind of a fast pay initiative, if you will. So what are the results? Since the signing of this executive order in July, August timeframe, we have predicted that there would be an influx of capital into the economy. Well, the prediction is now coming to fruition. It looks like over $1.3 trillion, which was already destined to be put in the economy, got into the economy sooner rather than later, and this continues to happen. Essentially, what this did is it made 2014 be a much more profitable new year for smaller companies. Profitable in the sense that they didn't necessarily get new business. They got their money faster, and they didn't have to go to loan sources. And some of these loan sources were 40 to 50% for money that was already theirs. And so it's an interesting.
So what do you think the total scale is? The impact, 1 billion, 200 million, 15 billion. Any?
What? Yeah, dollar amounts?
Yeah,
we're already past that. We're in 1.3
Wow.
trillion dollars.
So is it true to say that Brian helped create a initiative that saved trillions of dollars?
All I could say is I had some material input at some point, but I would have to demur to that and say that I was very impressed by the individuals I've come across that were working for President Obama. A lot of them have moved on.
Brian, we all commend you. All the small businesses out there commend you for your brilliant work.
Mm.
Well, it was a great time,
If
and
you could only
it's great
take
to see.
1% of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
The next one, episode 27, we had the payments and social media are on a collision course episode. This one I remember got a particularly high viewership.
Yes.
Partially, I think, just because of the combination of the companies that we talked about. But this one, we really hit a good stride talking about the Square Cash, Pinterest, CardSpring, and what the future looks like. And I think this is the time. Was this before or after Square Cash or Snapcash was launched? I believe
This
it
was
was
way before Snapcast.
Way
before.
before. I
Yeah,
think it
so
was
this is when we started predicting it.
Twitter buying CardSpring,
Right,
Facebook
right, right.
introducing the
Yep.
buy
And
button, and Dell accepting Bitcoins.
Yeah, and we probably freaked out a whole lot of people at Square and Snapchat over this because we were really early talking about it. I mean, it seemed like maybe one or two writers had touched upon the fact that Snapcash might be doing this. Faisal certainly dived into this. I did, and we were looking at the convergence of communication and person-to-person payments, what we call that today. And it turned out that Snapchat went and partnered with Square for Square Cash, and Facebook still hasn't devised a payment scheme
Yet.
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 They
And
haven't
the
launched it yet.
Yeah, and the CardSpring Twitter scenario is starting to bear fruit right now. There are card-linked offers that are starting to do quite well via Twitter. So it's a great acquisition, a shocking acquisition to me because really any of the large payment companies or startups should have been working with CardSpring. I mean, I'm shocked that it wasn't so obvious. And Twitter, they do all right with it, but probably not as good as, certainly PayPal or Square would have done. I mean, either one of those companies would have really have extended this capability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Pinterest is going to be doing payments in 2015. I'll crystal ball that. So that's on the horizon.
Yep, and it's slightly off social media, but I do think Quora's plan in 2015 is to launch the payment aspect, turn credits into dollars, or at least have the ability to interchange those.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Brian's a millionaire. He's
Yeah.
a Quora millionaire.
If you could cash out at your bank,
I don't know.
there'll be an exchange rate.
I'm not counting on it, but I think Quora is it is a social network, and I think they're going to find unique ways to monetize. I hope that tipping becomes more relevant, on Quora, because I think it makes a great deal of sense to secure good talent there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we can go on. We had some other exciting episodes about tipping. The next one, episode 28, was about Amazon's secret payment plan, as we called it, and we discussed. This one we discussed Starbucks, the CEO of Starbucks, what his plan was, and I remember just a really interesting aside you had about Starbucks and sort of the innovation they had in payments.
News about this right now, actually. As of this week, Starbucks is completely abandoning anything having to do with Square. So the Square wallet will no longer be useful inside of Starbucks, even though they abandoned the Square wallet.
Howard Schultz is out of the board. I mean, that happened a few months ago. But.
Howard walked off the board at precisely a year after joining it, and 2 weeks later announced to the world that he's starting his own payment company, essentially. and he's announced that in three different investor calls. Every investor call, he brings up the supremacy of Starbucks and the fact that companies other than Starbucks have been testing or interested in utilizing their base system. So that's happening, and it's a bit of an embarrassment for Square. And it's funny because Square came back with Square Order again this week and is charging zero cost for the merchants that are using Square Order. And that generated a whole lot of Twitter traffic with me. Mike Dudas and a few other notables who write a lot about payments were scratching heads about why would you do this? And the obvious thing is customer acquisition costs at 2.75%. Well, it really isn't all that simple. If it was just 2.75%. Perhaps, but it actually compounds to be much more than that when you really look at it. And what are you really acquiring? You're not really acquiring loyalty on the consumer side necessarily, and you're not really acquiring loyalty on the merchant side. So in either case, the whole Starbucks thing took place, kind of capped off the end of this year. And of course, Amazon. This is before Amazon released Amazon Register. And I took a lot of hits about this, not as much as Apple payment hits, but a lot from people who should really know better about payments. And, these are experts apparently. And they said, Amazon's not going to go and do a Square clone. That's ridiculous. And we started seeing Pay with Amazon as a one-click for independent websites. So how's that doing? Well, that was kind of been around for a while, but how's that doing? It is actually taking off. Nobody writes about it because it's not as exciting, but there's a lot more of these buttons appearing on smaller websites. And I think Amazon's going to come out at the first quarter of next year stating that over 60% of all sales on Amazon platform are from independent sellers, meaning Amazon never purchased the goods, so to speak, and made it for sale on their own platform. So it's a big change. And, I think by mid 2015, we'll be talking about both of these Starbucks Amazon scenarios, and it'll be
big news.
Interesting.
I wonder how Starbucks can expand out of Starbucks. Who knows? Episode 29.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll dedicate a whole episode to it. Episode 29. This one was this was an
fire
offshoot.
chat between. There was a fire chat between you and Brian and Mike, right?
Yeah, we missed Faisal, so we didn't know what to do, so we just got philosophical. We got philosophical.
Yeah, tectonic plate shifts. That's all I remember. So.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. We kind of got a chance to just brain dump what the future looks like and sort of the subtleties of growing businesses and all of that sort of thing. Episode 30 was really great. We had the CEO, Joaquin Yuso de Paul. He is the CEO of Quapay. Quapay I always found to be such an interesting company, and particularly the way he runs it. Coming from Spain,
and this was in Chile, right?
So they launched in Chile, and we talked about a big part of the episode why they chose to launch in Chile. So they sold a company, essentially the Facebook of Spain, called Twice, for close to 200 million, and the founding team came over to Santa Monica. They were working with a couple other startups. Then they realized the problem in mobile payments, and they, being the geniuses they are, launched Quapay. And they did so a few blocks from where we are. We met them when they had 4 people, and they hit difficulties trying to launch in Los Angeles and going door to door. So essentially they used the ability that they had to network with Spanish-speaking countries and essentially go to Chile and say, look, we're a brilliant, California-based startup that can help you with your mobile payments for your customers. And they were really excited. Everyone there was, I remember him discussing this and saying that they were all very genuine and excited to have this California-based startup, and it just gave them such an in. And I remember even my eyes being open to, maybe it's better to launch in a non-traditional place. Maybe it's better to be a big fish in a small pond.
I love that interview, and you really pulled out a lot of that sort of spice to this story. The fact that, here you had this scrappy entrepreneur that this was pulling at different angles to get a product launched. And instead of trying to drive it down the middle of a big city in California, went out to, what some people would consider out into the wilderness. But he winds up walking away with one of the largest gas fuel dealers in the country.
Yeah,
and it's growing.
He had Walmart. He had, I think, at least at the time, 40% of all the gas stations in Chile using Quapay. So I think kind of the strategy there, which I believe is brilliant, is to kind of keep it low key. He doesn't try to go out and get as many, TechCrunch and publication articles as he can. He tries to just grow his business in a strong way in places that are outside the visible eye. And then he's going to come into the States with an ironed out product with massive distribution all across probably South America. And I think he's in a great position to crush it. Probably challenges face him ahead with Apple Pay. I mean, this is naturally going to be one of those companies that
could actually merge with Apple Pay in a positive way.
Yeah, sure. They could be the couponing piece of it,
or actually drive a payment vehicle that is extended from it. I mean, there's a lot of those options that are going to come aboard. But great success, and I just am amazed by the story. But again, being off the radar screen, very few people still know about it. I get a lot of colleagues come back. They said, "Hey, I heard that episode. I've never heard of this company." So
yeah,
it's an amazing thing.
It's great. So then we had a little aside, and I do want to remind everyone that this should be a two-way street. Brian Faisal and I do this to interact with all of you, for the benefit of you, for the benefit of us. We just enjoy talking about all these ideas, but we do want to, and we found a little spike after we pushed this article, but we want to hear ideas, questions. We've always talked about running business ideas from people who listen, bringing people on the show for small guest appearances. And we just want to reiterate that it makes all the difference in the
Yeah.
world.
Sometimes we do run out of ideas on what to talk about, so it does help.
Yeah. 31 was great. We had Cass
Yeah,
Phillips on the
Cass
show.
Phillips.
So
That was a good
Cass,
one.
yeah, Cass runs the conference FailCon, essentially taking the opposite approach of bringing on companies who have not succeeded to become billion-dollar companies and learn why, which I think now gets the credibility it deserves. At the time, probably looked at as an outcast-themed conference. Um,
Mm.
so we were a speaker from FlowTab, from our days in FlowTab, which didn't end up working out, and got to know her real well, and brought her on the show to learn about startup founders and kind of the emphasis on why things don't work. Particularly in payments, there's been a lot of tries, a lot of swings at the bat, and things just don't work out, and people make the same mistakes over and over. Brian, I know this is sort of your driving motivation in writing so much. So
Groundhog Day. Yeah,
this
Groundhog Day.
it was awesome to have her on. I know Cass now doesn't dedicate 100% of her time to the conference, so she was looking for someone to take it over and sort of scale it
And the
internationally.
conference is worldwide, I mean,
Worldwide,
it
yeah.
went to places like Tehran and Dubai and God
hmm
knows where else.
Yeah,
And she's
so
so articulate. I mean, I was just impressed by
yeah,
her attitude
absolutely.
and her very positive nature. I mean, you'd think from this it was, maybe surface reading. It's a negative thing. Extremely positive. I mean, she loves that whole contribution. I think, especially how you were telling her how you were interacting with what happened with FlowTab. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
But
So if anyone
hopefully
is
it
is
continues.
interested in getting more involved, just reach out. Happy to introduce you to Cass. She is a fantastic woman. The next one, episode 32, we talked about, and this is Brian. This is where you just unleashed the
Yeah,
knowledge. You
this was
dropped a bomb.
Brian's probably best. I mean,
Yeah.
Brian went on, he was in the zone on this one
Yeah,
on how to
man.
mine cryptocurrencies. By the way, we still owe people the part two of this one.
hmm
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny. It's such a fast-moving situation. A lot of the early miners are still at it. A lot of the late miners jumped out because it became much more complex. You used to be really you were printing money. It's a little bit more complex, but a lot of people come back to me from that show and said, you got me started on mining,
Yeah, because
and
you introduced, I mean, there's sites here that no one knew about. Coinwars.com/cryptocurrency, IPO miner. The other link we have on here. There's just so many things that people didn't know about,
Yeah,
and you kind of
because
opened their eyes to it.
the current the general populous opinion is that you mine bitcoins and
yeah.
it's now a game for economies of scale. But what many people don't know is you actually mine other currencies and you go to these exchanges and take those currencies and convert them to Bitcoin and so forth.
Yeah, it's funny because the opportunity keeps exploding because there's still more and more coins that are generated and there's more and more of a market.
So
It's funny.
it's more like mining arbitrage, right?
It is. And what you're trying to do is marshal the power of your script miner or your SHA 256 miner, which is a Bitcoin protocol, and trying to get the best use out of it. And your target might be, currency, or it might be Bitcoin or something else. But it's funny, back then we were talking about Razor, and a person that found me because of this podcast mined millions of Razor coin, and they converted a $5,000 mining investment into almost $75,000. And this was in cash. They actually were trying to
Wow.
mine for a startup bootstrapping capitalization. They were right there in Palo Alto, living in a house with probably about 40 startup engineers, and they said, I'm just sick of waiting for money. I got an idea. I need about 50K, and I'm going to mine to get it. And they went and did it. So it's not impossible. It's harder today. I wouldn't be mining Razor today, for example. IPO miners still doing well, but yeah, the story is going to change, and it's sort of a parallel story to what's really going on with the regulation of Bitcoin and the use of it as a currency, et cetera. It's really it's more the industrial aspect of it. It's sort of like, very much like mining for gold and all the complexities of doing that, whereas the use of gold as a storehouse of wealth is handled by now, commodity
So
traders, et
I
cetera.
think it's fair to say that we can revisit this next
Yeah,
year
we're gonna have to go
Oh, yeah.
episode
and
2 on this one.
and ask you explicitly, what do you think still about mining about Dogecoins and Litecoins and the
Ooh,
other things
yeah.
that we have running. Yeah.
Still mining,
and,
but not those things. I can tell you
and
that.
some new websites and places to go to learn about this stuff. Episode
Episode
33.
Oh, Nate! Wow, this was
We brought on
33. This is
Nate.
your friend, Nate.
Yeah,
Nate Stewart.
so Nate and I worked together at Zing when it was called Zing Checkout. The exciting time frame here was they were just about to launch the new, completely redesigned and rebranded Zing.co, and that has been launched successfully, and I know it has brought in a ton of traffic, a much better user experience, and sort of rethinking how point-of-sale software interface should look. So I think they're just continually just heads down focused, based in Austin, Texas, always looking to hire smart front-end, back-end engineers. I just can't say enough good things about Nate and wish him all the best. Hasn't had any major news since we last spoke, so I think they're just gonna innovate, heads down, grow, point of sale.
actually run into a couple of Zing installs out in the wild, so he's doing well. This is good to see. You need this. There's never going to be a winner take all in tablet POS or POS in general. There's always going to be a mix, and the unfortunate part is there's sort of a monoculture that takes place in the Silicon Valley of this big POS versus the old POS. And I wish the world worked that way, maybe from one regard, but this innovation that comes from guys like Nate and Mike when he was back there, they drive everything in this economy, in this market. And if they weren't there, a lot of these guys would be probably going back to pen and paper because the other things in the market really don't make any sense to them.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
and
good to see.
I couldn't agree with you more. It feels great to be working on things like that. Episode 34, boy.
Now this was the best show probably
I feel like
out
they're
there.
just
So
getting better
this
and
is
better.
Yeah, they keep getting better.
so this was one of the. I know Mike couldn't make this one, but Brian and I decided to go ahead. This was shortly after Apple Pay was released, and the whole
Yeah.
thing, and it was a 90-minute show, and this was Brian's crowning moment, so to speak.
Creme de la creme.
I felt, and I think the world felt, and a lot of readers on Quora felt Brian was vindicated by all the posts that he
Oh,
was
boy.
doing on Apple Pay, all the write-ups he was doing, and has been doing for about good 3 years. And a lot of people said, you know what, I don't get it. Why he's always after Apple? And he kept saying, go back to the patents. Go back to the patents. Go
Yeah.
read them.
It was
Go read
lonely.
them,
It was lonely at
It
times.
was lonely.
And yeah, I mean, I'd be the only person
But
kind
sir,
of seeing
good
this.
on you. Good
Thank
on
you.
you because
I appreciate it. It was got a lot of support from people along the way. So I don't want to say it was that lonely. There were people like yourself, Faisal and Mike, and all rallied around Quora and the different subjects we like talking about. And my addiction to this was primarily because I loved Apple. I think Apple has consistently found ways to engage users in a manner that you just don't find in other computer devices. Now, will that last forever? I don't know, but Tim Cook is doing quite a good job. And Apple Pay is I'd say 60% Tim Cook. The remainder is Steve Jobs and some other individuals that I know internally. The thing that's just so amazing about all this is, in hindsight, it looks so obvious, right? Today, everybody
Yeah, it
acts
always
like,
does, right?
yeah, well, of course that was going to happen, but
it didn't change. It didn't change the status quo. It works flawlessly.
exactly.
It didn't challenge. It's intuitive. It keeps everyone happy. It respects privacy, which was a big thing. They decided not to use the data, not have visibility to the data.
It was
Or the
such
spending.
a big move, and it was so ahead of its time. I mean, when I started really accelerating on this was just about the time when Apple acquired Authentec, and it was mind blowing to me that a major patent holder. I mean, Authentec's patents are so unique in the fact that you don't have to swipe your finger to get a fingerprint read. Now, most of us prior to Authentec were used to fingerprint swiping systems, and they were so inaccurate. They're very much like the way a fax machine or scanner would work. They would just take snippets at a time. So we'd call that a serial device.
Swiper, remember?
Yeah, yeah, and they stunk. They were just terrible. And Authentech revolutionized the whole scan process, where you put your thumb over and it's fast and it's efficient.
Like
and
taking a photograph of your fingerprint.
Exactly the difference. You nail on the head. One was using a scanner serial technology, and this was more of a parallel, holistic technology, if you will. And it is proven to be so incredible that you would really be challenged to get people to give up their Touch ID phones now. They just are so used to it. And so now, where is this going with encryption? Well, I think Apple has set a standard that has really challenged all other payment companies who were going to monetize by selling customer data or merchant data, whether it was randomized or made anonymous. It still is going to be very, very hard. I think Apple has laid down the gauntlet, and it's injured a lot of business plans. Nobody expected that. Some of my intuition was telling me that, but there are some things I just didn't want to write about, even though I kind of knew reading the patents, because it's not my job to completely expose what Apple's going to do. As it is, I was cutting along the edge of the line. I can say at this point, I got contacted a few times, never by attorneys, never by anybody legal, but by friends internally in the company, and said, just keep within the fence line. You know where that is. And I was never told exactly where it is about how they're going to be doing this. But, again, back then, I was just this crazy crank with a tinfoil hat on.
Now you're vindicated, man.
Yeah. So Apple Pay is, a quick update. Apple Pay is exceeding all records as far as NFC usage. They are representing 20% of mobile payments today as we speak at Whole Foods Market. They are exploding at the charter members of using Apple Pay. McDonald's, Subways, a lot of use cases there. Panera,
they're killing it.
Yeah, so it's a great thing that they did. Change the world.
And thanks for that one, Brian. That was a really great episode.
Thank you, guys.
Episode 35. We responded to a few great requests from Brian and Dustin. Yeah, they asked us, really, we sort of took the ball and ran with it how do you launch a startup? How do you launch a Bitcoin startup? What does that even look like? And how would you even think about that? We really digested that and wrote down a few ideas, that in the show notes there, the biggest problem you could solve, the actionable steps. I think Faisal
did so good about this, about opening up people's mind to what remittances really are. There are people in the industry that didn't really understand why would people send money overseas so often.
If you don't touch it and feel it, if you don't know it, part of your life, you don't know it.
Yeah. So Faisal really opened eyes on that and maybe telegraphed his future, because Faisal's moving on into that world, it appears.
Wow. It was a good one. And we also touched upon Pinterest and, the possibility of them entering into the payments, because it seems like a natural evolution the way things are going on Pinterest. Yeah. And what could end up hurting them if they do it wrong.
Yeah, and this was before Etsy created their own payment reader, and nobody talks about that today, but Etsy is doing incredibly well. I was at a farmer's market essentially, and but it was more of a crafts fair in LA, and I was blown away with how many people were using Etsy readers. I went down an aisle. Yeah, I went down.
You see the orange everywhere?
Yes, and I went down an aisle, and I said to my wife, I go, okay, I'm going to take a break here. I got to do some in-field research, and I talked to about 15, 20 merchants, two of them really in detail. I go, have you always used Etsy? No, I was using Square. No, I was using PayPal. Mostly Square. I think Square in that particular flea market lost to the 90 percentile. And the only reason why was that they sell primarily on Etsy, and they're for the holiday shopping season, they're opening up these little tents, if you will, on the street. One woman was doing this art, and her average sale was $3,000.
Wow.
And she was moving 3 pieces while I was talking to her. She's
Wow.
multitasking all
Boy,
on the Etsy platform.
if they
So,
cut Square from the bottom and cut them from the top, I don't know what's left.
well, the thing is, it didn't have to be that way. Why not just partner with Etsy? Why did you have to go
Yeah,
after it with Square
we
Market?
we dedicate an episode to that
Yeah.
one.
So, but anyway, Pinterest is on the way to do that. I equate Pinterest and Etsy in really almost the exact category because the creations we see on Pinterest a lot of times are pretty much homemade. I almost see these two companies merging. Maybe I'll telegraph a note to the future here. Maybe 2015 might see some sort of merger of Pinterest and Etsy. Be very
Love
interesting.
that. Episode 2036 was we brought on the CEO of True Accord,
Oh,
Samit.
hot.
This is such a great episode. I love
I
the
loved it.
idea. It's sort of
Now, he's a brilliant man by himself because of
Absolutely.
the insights that this gentleman has onto the debt collection industry and how they are revolutionizing it was absolutely stellar. It was an amazing story. You think collection agencies, you think, oh my God, those endless phone calls, etc. But this gentleman, uses his background, I believe his brother's background in the IDF and in the analytics world and big data and God knows what else and fraud
I know.
analytics.
Over in Israel, like
and-
they just
Yeah, and the way they have structured it is phenomenal. And I think this is a company that's really doing something really stellar in the business of debt collection and very good to have Ohad.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think-
And we've been talking for a long time about getting him on board.
yeah,
on
no,
one of the
absolutely.
shows.
And they raised
Yeah.
so they raised $5 million from Kosa Ventures, Max Levchin, and a few more. But what I really like too, and we feel this pain, is if you're billing clients and you have how do you collect from your customers? It's always this awkward thing to where you can't cut them and leave them, but you have to. What do you send them emails? Like no companies, including Home Hero, know what to do. So I think they really address a core problem, even though it's non-sexy from the outside consumer perspective.
Yeah, I think Ohad is going down a path that is really going to revolutionize banking and granting of funds. And it was a gentleman that did the payday loan. We talked about in the last show. What did I forget his name?
I forgot his name.
With LendUp?
Yeah,
Sasha
Linda.
Orlov?
Yeah, Sasha, right? I
Sasha.
believe that Sasha and Ohad are on the future of what banking is going to look like. I call it on-demand credit granting and almost predicting your inability to pay and working with you before you become a bad actor. And
It's taking a market which has a very negative connotation and feel to it by reputation and changing it around and say, no, there is a better way of doing it,
yeah, and there's value in it. Nobody's going to stay a deadbeat forever. You are going to need to re-enter into the economy. And prior to companies like Ohad, they assume that you're just a bad actor, you're a bad debtor, and you're never going to pay back. And I've been in payments for 30 years. I've never come across that. And the check guarantee industry really was the pioneer of what Ohad's doing. And in a sense that we understood, and it was one of the things I was involved in back in the 80s.
Speaking of bad actors, episode 37 and Klinkle.
Oh,
Yeah. This one was fun.
it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, even now we don't know what to say about it.
I think we gave a few interesting perspectives. One I sort of have is I think it's nice to see companies in a however you can say that in a respectful way not succeed, because it sort of puts perspective into that every company who raises money is not going to be a winner. And it's not easy to do this stuff. And
look at the names
You know,
of people who
yeah,
invested.
and it's just like even the big guys, the successful ones, mess up. So I think this is a really humbling story for a lot of founders out there.
It's
Sort
also
of
hard to
reminds-
watch,
It sort of
because
reminds me it's like a
embarrassing.
net zero game,
Yeah.
Someone has to lose.
But they renamed the app Treats by Klinkle, and I just feel like who's ever putting the marketing together is so missing the mindset of the student college student marketplace. I mean,
it
it's
was-
almost like what the original check-in feeling was like. I mean, this is not to put an onus on Foursquare, but most of us who've observed human behavior and studied it know that certain type of mechanisms will not extend into the future. We knew that check-in wasn't going to last forever, but the value of Foursquare expanded and exploded. The same thing with this whole aspect that people are going to go through all these incredible gyrations to try to get a treat. And then to have to try to explain how you get it in more than 6 or 7 paragraphs, you might as well just erase the board and start all over again
Yeah.
because it's got to be simple. We also talked about Stripe, and this is when Stripe was really starting to get, my gosh, Facebook payments. We're talking about Twitter. Patrick and company there are doing incredible, and this was the beginning where they were starting to expose just how large their relationships were going. So that was.
And it was the
Great
week
show.
that PayPal sort of hinted at BTC in their wallet.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Very early mention of that. Absolutely.
And
Episode
then there was
38.
38.
Right. This is this is when there was a
This
little
is
bit of
this is
continuing
the
on the
clash
drama.
of, I think the clash of the titans is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
My gosh, and the thing is Carl Icahn has such a long history and as a
As a troll.
disruptor of publicly traded companies. The thing we got to remember, and if you got to put a meter on this, I'm 100% behind Mark Andreessen on this, but you gotta also hand it to the fact that the publicly traded company exists for only one purpose, and that is to create more value for shareholders. And even though that sounds like it's self-apparent, it's so hard even for people who are in business to fully grasp what that means. It means that there is almost an undying, let's call it selfish drive to constantly find ways to increase profit. And a lot of these profits do not come with glory. And guys like Icahn have found ways to liberate profits, if you will, to shareholders by not glorious means. I mean, a lot of CEOs and startup founders are saying, no, I'm not going to loot this and do that.
We compared him to Gordon Gekko, I believe.
It was actually written, the whole Gordon Gekko character was written around Carl Icahn during the leverage buyout of Eastern Airlines.
I think Mike was talking earlier on before we started the show about the playbook concept, and I think the playbook of Carl Icahn is the playbook of Gordon Gekko.
There's no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot happening that week. I think the next episode 39 was when Etsy came up with their
We already kind of talked about that, but still doing exceedingly well, and unfortunately hurting Square. It's very base.
The other thing we talked about too was 2 other companies, Tipalti raising 13 million. I love bringing in really, companies that sometimes are just so big internationally, but so they're viewed with a microscope here. They're not even considered. SumUp comes to mind. Tipalti raised 13 million. These are companies that, especially on a consumer perspective, would be big names in Silicon Valley if they were here, but out of sight, out of mind again. And so I like
North
to
American.
Tipalti is the kind of company that would essentially be the payment rails for a lot of the corporate accounts in the U.S. and not many people would know about it. It's like you know about the scenic route from New York to Chicago or what have you on the trail, on the train, but who owns the tracks and who's supplying it and who's making it?
Exactly.
It sort of gets lost in the noise, and Tipalti is one of those companies.
Yeah, it's again an unsexy business that many writers don't like to write about.
And also too interesting. Jumio is a company that I think went through a identity crisis when Apple Pay came out, and sort of they've done a few different things, right? They've done the identification, so companies like Airbnb will use them to validate driver's licenses and essentially make the online identity.
Yeah, so Jumio has become more of a KYC company, more or less,
which is appropriate. It really is appropriate, and
I think in this world where there's a lot of federal regulation and state regulation coming on KYC as more and more money is becoming electronic, they want to have I guess better controls, and Jumio is one of those companies that's responding to that demand.
I love the brand and a great fit and a much needed value add if they can really nail it. Episode 4040 was the FinCEN earthquake. So
Faisal talked a lot about this.
Yeah.
Well, it was about how FinCEN came up and said, guess what? We are going to sort of regulate all Bitcoin businesses with respect to if you're a processor, if you're a broker, if you're an exchange, doesn't matter if you're in the US or not, you now need to be regulated, and why it would have a huge impact. And I guess the show discusses this in quite detail, what it would mean for Bitcoin exchanges and processors and brokers worldwide and
Any
in the US.
any update even since November on sort of the
So
FinCEN
there's
sway pendulum?
so there's a lot, a lot of the states. I mean, I'll say this publicly. A lot of the state regulators have been looking the other way, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not fair. Let me put it this way as well. They are looking the other way. They are not taking the required action that is supposed to be taken. Why, I don't know. But then there are states who are saying, listen, barring till such time till we have a draft of our own laws, you can't operate in our states, like New York, for example. But then yet again, they're still looking the other way. There are companies who are picking up clients from New York, both within the U.S. and outside the U.S., and New York is not doing anything about it. So I guess it's.
I guess that's what's
I mean,
frustrating for a lot of companies, right? Because you're constantly in this. Do I try it and say I'm sorry, or do I follow the
No,
rule?
the question is, how big do you have to get before they come after you? I guess it's all about it. It comes down to that. If I'm processing $150,000 a month, New York may say, that's pocket change, not even worth my lawyer time. But if I'm doing $150 million a month, New York will say, well, hold on, maybe we need to not just slap them on the wrist, but put them a fine and make an example out of them. But insofar as I can tell, no regulator has quote unquote the balls to go after them yet.
Very true.
There, I said it.
Yeah. Let's see.
41.
41. This was
Nick
great.
Manio. This is when the tipping was launched by Coinbase, and we
Wow.
had Nick Manio from Coinbase to come and explain it to us.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So they reached out to us and asked, would you guys be an early beta launch partner with Coinbase, which is, they're the titan of Bitcoin potential, I'll call it. And since that day, I'm looking at our transactions now in Coinbase, and every day we get tips. It's just incredible. Mark Bridges, Lisa Rao, I'm just reading off some of the names that have tipped us. It seems to be looking like a sort of qualitative average around 0.0005 to 10 Bitcoins. So not a lot of money, but I think there's just the
It's the
start.
thought that counts,
It's
right?
the thought that counts. So I see
Yeah.
there's hundreds of people who have tipped us on
So
this podcast.
everyone who's tipped us, I tip my hat to you and say thank you.
I say thank you too. And when we reach $1 million, Mike and I will write a song.
Yes, absolutely. Been working on it.
We
That's
will
a goal.
do the Reddit. We will do the Reddit thing. We will distribute our earnings amongst 10% of our loyal followers, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
love
absolutely.
that.
What's funny is I have a lot of people that have mentioned to me that they sent over a tip, and what they're really wanting to do is tip on a regular basis. So we need to sit down with Nick and allow for them to look at the possibilities of reoccurring in one click. So you get to that click button and you say 5 cents, reoccur weekly, monthly. And that is
Yeah.
the part that's going to change the world. That's a subscription model that I think is so well needed for this type of content. And my feeling is they've opened this up to everybody now. And my feeling is it is a radical success for the company. I think there's a lot more adoption, a lot more volume, and we'll probably certainly have Nick on in 2015 to talk about it in detail. But we are living through a transformative period where media, reporters, journalists, writers, analysts, researchers, all of their content, their mind share, if you will, is going to be completely transformed. It's
Yeah.
not going to look the same,
Hey,
and
as an aside note,
And if you,
there's a nice pronounced link to Around the Coin as a so if you look at halfway down, who's using Coinbase tips. So we're right next to Beacon, Hunter Walk, the Morning News. So thank you, thank you Coinbase for putting us in there.
yeah,
We appreciate
very
that visibility.
appreciative.
and then there was the famous case of, I guess, the nemesis of Apple Pay,
Yeah,
if you
boy,
will, the
MCX.
MCX, who are now called, what are they called now?
Currency.
Boy, whoever's doing their
C.
marketing needs a
Boy, Brian went after them with a couple of bulldogs on this one.
Yeah, the thing is, it's died down a lot, and basically, it's like any shotgun wedding. You wake up and maybe you had a few too many drinks, and there's a shotgun, and you look over and you say, I'm getting married. Oh my God, I think what happened was a lot of the members of MCX joined for very legitimate purposes, and a lot of people forget what the purpose was. They scoured the market. They went to Square, went PayPal, all the legacy companies said, please, we want to work with you to build a wallet. Some of these companies didn't even answer the phone, didn't even take the call. They said, no, Sears and, all these different companies, Shell, 7-Eleven. No, it doesn't sound sexy. If you were like maybe Louis Vuitton or Grump's Coffee House or something like that. Yeah, then we'll think about it. Anyway, long story short is they decided to put together their own mobile payment system. And it sounded great, and Walmart helped back it. The underlying theory was they wanted to hurt Visa and MasterCard. Walmart has had an ongoing feud with Visa because they see Visa and MasterCard more like a utility that should be for free. It's like, you wind up paying for electricity after a while, and you say, well, why do I need to pay for that? Well, somebody's got to wake up every morning to make sure it's working, right? And, the reality is somebody makes sure Visa and MasterCard works, and somebody makes sure that the deadbeats are collected upon. Hopefully,
And
OHAD will change that.
Didn't Walmart sue Visa?
Yes, and they won. And in fact, it wound up making credit card payments cost more to merchants. See, and this is the problem with lawsuits and regulation is that they have an unintended impact. The Durbin Amendment raised everybody's costs to accept credit cards. Long story short is now I have direct sources inside of members of this MCX, including people who work at MCX. Imagine these people. They are not Walmart. They're not 7-Eleven. They're an independent company they formed that must be beholding to these masters. And they're taking the mother of all negative media fluffs, and they're doing it as well as can be predicted. But internally the morale is down, and some of the charter members are saying, "Man, when my contract's up, I want nothing to do with these folks. I didn't sign up to be a mercenary for Walmart in their war against Visa and MasterCard."
So is currency going down long term?
No, it'll be in the background. It will be alive simply because any company that's large enough, like Walmart and a few of these others that will stay with it, they'll be able to keep anything on life support. Even a dead corpse would continue to move its arms with the animatronics. So this is going to be around for a while. My prediction is we'll start hearing about MCX being used on Apple Pay's environment with NFC and iBeacons in the
join
future.
the Apple squad.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
So episode 43.
This is when I was, visiting Istanbul when you guys did this.
Yeah, we got a little off the farm.
Yeah, I feel like there's a trend here, Fess. Whenever you're not in here, we don't know what to do, and we just start talking about.
You guys get all philosophical, huh?
Yeah, philosophical.
Yeah,
but this was a good one. I heard this later on, and was you guys touched on. I think the best one was Sheryl Sandberg married David Goldberg, and I was like, just couldn't help laughing at that one.
Yeah, a little mix of everything going on here. The chicken soup for the startup founder.
It really was. It was cool. I had a good time.
But you want to know something? What really was strange about this, and I don't get to speak to the philosophical side very often publicly, but I had a lot of people reach out to me saying, "I'm in the winter of my life. I'm, and these, I got to tell you, two people are really well known, and they're like, that really hit me. And I said, it's a very simple view. So you're telling me spring is going to come? I go, or you die. I mean, basically, there's always going to be a cycle, and unless you're not going to be around, the very next cycle is going to be spring. It's going to happen, and so it's interesting. I feel.
Funny because for many companies winter is coming, as they say in Game of Thrones, and for many the summer was the summer of discontent.
Yeah, we're going to look back, and this is kind of as we're wrapping up close to here. We're going to look back at 2014 as being one of the most transformative periods in technology and finance.
Not just that, I think, Brian, it's also been a very learning experience because, and not from a payments perspective, but I think on the general public at large, the awareness levels on payments has really shot up through the roof, has really gone mainstream, very horizontal. Vertical it has, obviously, but very horizontal. A lot of people are now talking about payments, not about inventing payments, but how can they become part of the ecosystem with Bitcoin? How can they, accept more efficient methods of
Absolutely.
payment?
Even the person
So,
on the street, I'm still conducting a couple of studies with Apple Pay and usage, and I kind of took a break for the holidays. But my last observation was watching people just getting thrilled, enchanted by using this,
I'm a little
technology.
upset. I'm a little upset by the naysayers, who feel that Apple Pay is not, I mean, I don't know what they wanted it to be, but and they, I don't know if it's the Apple fanboy club or haters are going to hate or what it is, but I feel there's a lot of negativity surrounding Apple Pay for, I guess, no valid reason.
Yeah, this has been going on since I've been writing about this, 2009, 2010. And, there's a legion of people that just, from a nerd perspective, say, well, I can build a better machine than Apple. I can build a faster. That's always been true. Apple's, claim to fame has been to be able to popularize a group of technologies into a cohesive experience that works. And the reality is, they have been so successful with Apple Pay. There's nothing to complain about other than the fact that there are a few merchants that politically chose not to accept it. Not because Apple Pay in and of itself costs more, it costs exactly the same as a swipe credit card. It's because they're trying to make another political statement. But on the consumer side of things, why would you get angry over people being enchanted? This doesn't take Google out of the or Android out of the picture. It just requires them to step up their game. Those that were supporting, startups and their, schemes to make wallets, well, you should be thankful. There were a group of startups that wanted to create a closed wallet. They wanted this wallet to be proprietary. You can only go to them. And they weren't making APIs. They weren't making it open for anybody to use. It was their own technology. Thankfully, in 2014, that has been abolished. Apple is opened on a number of fronts on their technology. iBeacons, which will become materially important, and NFC. There's nothing. Once NFC is adopted on a mass scale, which is certainly beginning, there's nothing to stop creative individuals to build around that known NFC, what I call Internet of Payments, around that infrastructure. It doesn't have to be iPhone. It doesn't have to be an Apple Watch. I am predicting a whole litany of, let's call them devices, which will interact with this NFC channel and iBeacons channel in a way that is complementary and maybe contradicting what Apple is doing. But Apple brought this technology into fore. So that's where we are on it. I looking back, it is 2014, a learning lesson for a lot of people. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
What do we hear? Episode 44. This
one was
Snapchat.
Faisal's recap of your conference
And his Mobile Money Global. Yeah.
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 Anything
Especially
come from that?
the M-Pesa thing. Remember the M-Pesa?
Oh, yeah.
How fantastic of a product it is, and I guess the one thing I still keep telling people, it's all about behavior. Technology is not the issue here. It's all about behavior.
Again, I love this one, Faisal, because it's things that people wouldn't otherwise see. No one knows, but people don't think about M-Pesa as being.
I mean,
a company.
300 people, about 20, 25 presentations. Not a single company, did a presentation like, oh, we are the second largest player in the world and we make this. No, they discussed behavior. They didn't sell themselves. They didn't sell their company. They were selling about and everyone was, agreed it's all about behavioral changes. And, even in M-Pesa, they didn't discuss the underlying technology or what the payment stack was or what the mobile stack is. They all kept going back and saying, it's a national consensus in the absence of a payment system. This is how Kenyans came across. I mean, she cited an example of an empty wall near a bus stop, which was, just an empty wall, with graffiti on it. 6 months or 9 months later, there were benches, there was a tea stall, that empty wall was painted black. and there were people trading prices of crops and vegetables from farmer to market and so forth.
That's cool.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all about national. So it's how payments are enabling them to become better and so forth. And that was the walk away.
And I love the
then we
emphasis on understanding people's behavior. I mean, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not about technology you can build.
It always is.
I think
Absolutely.
you know something we sort of forget. Everything we mimic online, is absolutely, positively, in my opinion, trying to model mathematically the human behavior.
Oh wow, deep philosophy there. I absolutely agree. And payments. I think the quagmire most people face is they don't understand that it's a form of communication and it's a form of expression. There's a lot of stuff that is transferred within that basket of ideas. But I mean, even when you're just giving somebody money for an item, like when I was at this swap meet sort of environment, that one-on-one interaction with an artisan and artist is profound. It actually is. To see the person who's created something and worked maybe 16, 20 hours on it, and they literally are handling it like a child. I mean, this woman that I bought a gift from my wife, she was handing it over to me like a child. She took a picture of me holding it. And I said, "Do you do this with everyone?" She goes, "Every single item I've ever made, I look at the people who bought it." And
But
it's just an
Brian,
amazing thing.
if you look at nomenclature, I mean, we still call it, payments and wallet and mail. We may add an I or an E in front of it, messenger, etc. We're trying to mimic the actual physical, human behavior that's done by atoms and, living flesh into electronics, by virtue of electrons and so forth. So we have to look at behavior rather than just the underlying technology. I don't think so that's ever an issue.
And I think 2014, we probably learned that with Apple, Apple negotiating with the infrastructure, the brilliance of what they did by not trying to disrupt bankers, but to sit them at a table and say, "Listen, guys, we're not going to unlock the doors until we have some way of making this all work. And by the way, you guys are going to prosper by it." I mean, that's exactly what Steve Jobs did with the record labels. And, as it is, music sales are down and music discovery is changing. But if Steve didn't do what he did with iTunes, imagine what the world would have looked like now. Because most music digitally was stolen. And looking forward into the future, when we talk about digital currency regulation and what the future is, it almost requires a Steve Jobs or maybe a John Kennedy space shot type of leadership. We'll go to the moon before the decade is out. We really need somebody to kind of coalesce all this and say, "Listen, we're not going to put this future in the hands of a bunch of regulators or a bunch of people whose job it is to build rules. We should put it in the hands of people who are creative thinkers to move our economy forward." And we are at the precipice of whether or not that's going to happen right now. And 2015 is going to be that deciding point. And before the show, all of us were sort of discussing what the future regulation would be like for digital currencies and the politics around it. My gosh, can you imagine if we were in that world where a political leader would stand up and say, "Listen, we're going to be the leader in the free world of digital currency. We're going to change the way money moves, and we're going to allow money to flow in a manner that it never did before, because it's going to touch even a bus stop and a wall in Kenya, which was an empty probably place for somebody to urinate, and now it becomes an open marketplace.
Yeah, it's so true.
I read this quote. I can't remember where. It's not a quote exactly. It's it's like water. You gotta let it flow. Got to let it find its own way, its own crevices. It'll make its own rivers and meandering and lakes and what have you. You got to let it go unfeathered. If you go and make a canal, then that's the only way. You will never ever discover what it could possibly do. So that's the kind of innovation that with cryptocurrencies and all currencies and what have you and payments. You have to let it go. Let people blossom and flourish. We can get them under the. An example I guess the Americans should look at are the British. They're saying, "Listen, just register with us. That's all we ask. Just register with us and go ahead and do anything." That's it.
A wrong turn at this point can make this whole thing go down a road that maybe a decade later history would record as being such a bad idea. So I'm looking positive to this because a lot of the people I've gotten to meet, fortunately, and so honored within government, are really very, very supportive of innovation and ingenuity. And I think Mike discovered that in Washington, D.C. also when it came to healthcare and regulation regarding that. I hopefully that is what is the dominant theme, and it stays there.
Brian, the sad fact is individually we are very enthusiastic about it. It's the system that we have to look at. Is the system embracing it?
It's funny. It's funny. The word system actually has roots to Roman times, and the very first use of the word system was for the sewer system within the Roman Empire. It later was transferred to the government. They would call it the system, and that wasn't an accident. That was actually a attribute to the direction the Roman concept of government had gone. And, if you look at early Roman Empire building and what they really did, at some point, they did incredibly glorious things. And then there was a shift from, really doing greatness by their, they were taking over parts of the world, yes, but they were raising the living standard of everybody there and not necessarily making it a tyrannical experience. But it shifted to the point where the government became the system. It became the place where people bought influence, and the existing infrastructure was so fearful of being removed. We are in that world still today, and the difference is Moore's law is now moving so much faster than the ability for human beings to understand what these changes represent, that the system itself better find ways to deal with it, because it's going to start.
Brian, this is why they need us.
Working backwards.
They need us to come set some tone.
The system.
Yeah, what a great recap. So I'll publish these together. It'll be part 1, part 2, and we'll go into 2015 with
maybe a
aspiration
prediction
of growing our user base. Kind of keep the same template, right, Faisal? Is there anything you think in terms of the 2015 projection that we'll want to do different that people should look out for? We want to get people more involved, as always.
Well, I think one of the things we will experiment, and I use the word experiment, we will try to have maybe 1, if not 2, maybe 3, who knows, maybe at least 2 shows that will be live during the work week. We'll see how it goes. We don't know how it, if people will come or not, but we'll tweet the hell out of it. We'll Facebook it.
We
write
might
it
be
on
doing
Twitter.
some remotes too, right? That'll be a live show.
Yeah. So we'll see. If a weekday live show brings in any traffic, significant traffic, listenership, viewership, we'll just see, because we don't know. We don't, and
maybe some guests.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, we definitely bring guests. No doubt about that. And I think Mike and I already discussed. We are now starting hopefully our 10 questions, which is where we are sending 10 questions, in an email to a CEO of a company and asking them to reply back.
Love
We've
it.
already made. And we'll be publishing that on our blog. So, if you have a question to ask for a particular CEO, we'll try our best to get it in. And, we'll give them enough time to reply back and so forth.
Absolutely.
And also we'd really like more interaction. We'd really love to have more, a lot of times people will contact me and say, maybe you can talk about this, and go, just write an email and 4 minutes of a question, send it to all of us.
Not only that, we could even open up the Skype channel for people to come in and have a 2-minute call or whatever.
I would love it. Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be doesn't necessarily have to be written. You can if you want to come in and join the call for maybe 5 minutes or 4 minutes, we'll be glad to do that as well.
Yeah. And if we get really desperate, we get the Kardashians, so we can really blow our numbers on YouTube.
Yeah, all in all, amazing.
Let's break the internet down, huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for, both consistently being here every week and bringing such innovative and fascinating ideas to the table for me and everyone else listening.
I think we are just getting warmed up.
Yeah,
just getting warmed up. Absolutely.
I got to thank you, Mike. You really are an incredible host. You actually motivate us in so many ways by not just your activities with this show, but just what you're doing in business. I'm, beyond impressed and blown away. And so I know I'm extremely grateful for what you've done here. And
Oh,
Likewise,
thanks,
sir.
guys. Well, have
Like,
a great Christmas, and we will talk to you afterwards.
Yes.
thank you. Take care and
Take
have
care.
happy holidays.
Happy
Cheers.
holidays. Bye bye.